Hello, today we are speaking with Clare Pooley. It's a new author in Editura Trei portfolio, which published Proiectul autenticității, the Authenticity Project, a book which I very much loved, and I was very touched by its characters and the story. My first question for you, Clare Pooley, is what was the inspiration behind this story?
Well, actually, the story was very much inspired by my own life, because about 5 years ago, if you looked at my Facebook feed or my Instagram, my life looked like it was all fairly perfect, and the reality was very different, because I had a very bad addiction to alcohol, and I was drinking far too much, and it was doing very bad things to my mental health and my physical health, but nobody knew about it. It was all under the surface. And I started writing a blog, which I called Mummy Was a Secret Drinker, and I told the truth about my life in this blog. And telling the truth about my life that way not only changed my life and helped me beat my addiction, but it also changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people who read it. And that sort of got me thinking, well, if telling the truth about your life, if being really authentic can change your life in so many ways, what would happen if other people did it? And that's really what led to the idea behind the Authenticity Project, which is the story of people who tell the real truth about their life, not in a blog like I did, but in an actual green notebook, which is passed between them.
Yes, but let's go a bit in the details. What does it mean to be authentic to yourself and to be authentic with others?
Oh, I think it means different things to different people, to be honest. And I'm not sure. I think however hard you try, it's always difficult to be completely authentic, because we all want to portray our lives in the best possible way. We always sort of try and put a brave face on and sort of, and show people, the best bits of our life and not the worst bits of our life. And I think what I was interested in is the fact that I think what we often forget is that it's our flaws, it's our faults that actually make us more interesting and more unique. And each of the characters in the book have a flaw. They all have something about them that is not perfect. And I think what they realize, and what I realized, is when you embrace your flaws, it really it makes you so much stronger.
Yes, indeed. You created in the book 6 very different characters. What was your relationship to each of them? Maybe you admire one of them, or feel more close to another.
Yeah, it's funny. It's I'm often asked which is my favorite, and it's like trying to choose a favorite child. You can't do it, because I feel very close to all of them. They lived in my head for so long. In fact, they still do in a way. And and I sometimes it made me feel like I was going a bit crazy when I was writing the book, because I had these 6 characters jostling for space in my head. But the really funny thing is that when my eldest daughter first read my book, she said, "Mummy, you do realize that all of these characters are a little bit like you, don't you?" And I hadn't realized that at all when I was writing it, but each of them shares something with me, apart from one. There's one character called Riley, who is
Yeah.
Australian, and he is almost perfect. You know, he's gorgeous and happy and well-adjusted and kind and lovely, and he's the only one that I don't really I feel isn't it doesn't share sort of a huge amount with me. But each of the others, there's something about their lives I really associate with. So Alice, for instance, is addicted to social media, which is something that I find I can struggle with. Hazard is an alcohol and cocaine addict, so I feel very close to him. And there's a character called Lizzie who's very nosy about other people's lives, which can be a bit like me too. And Monica, who is desperate to sort of find the right man and settle down and have a baby. And I remember very much being in my late 20s, early 30s, and thinking, having this feeling of the biological clock, which is for women is ticking, and you sort of think, I've got to find the right man to settle down with, which is an awful pressure to have. So yes, there's I think each of the characters I share something with. Julian is my creative side. He's the artist who starts off the Authenticity project, and he represents really my creative side.
Yeah, the ending of the book, it is very emotional and very profound. Have you thought about it from the first place, or did you have many, I don't know, many solutions for the end?
Oh, there was a big debate about the ending. To start with, I found when I was writing the book that some things I thought would happen didn't, and some things I didn't think would happen did, because you have to sort of, when you're writing, you have to let the characters tell their own story. And as you get to know them, they direct it in ways you weren't expecting. So there's a big twist towards the end, which I didn't know was coming. It would surprise me as much as it surprised everybody else. And I think that's why nobody anticipates that twist. I'm not going to say what it was because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but that was a big surprise to me. And then the ending, and again, I won't say exactly what happens at the end, but there was a big debate between myself and some of the publishers I was talking to. I was lucky enough to have lots of publishers interested in publishing the book, so I talked to a few before deciding which to go with, and one or two of the publishers I talked to wanted a different ending, and an ending that was more obviously happy than the ending that I wrote. And it was important to me that the ending wasn't entirely happy, because life isn't perfect. And I think if I'd made the ending too perfect, it would have felt too sweet and too unrealistic. So yeah, in the end, we stuck with the original ending, which I'm pleased about. And I think I have had a few people contact me saying, how could you do that at the end? But I think generally people understand why it ends the way it does.
Yes, I think I don't know, the main quality of your book is that it makes you to look at yourself and try to be better, to improve yourself. At
Yes,
least that's how I felt after I read it.
I think it makes people think, what would I write in that notebook if I found it? And I'm not sure it is so much about making yourself better as it is about accepting yourself for who you are. But I think something that has been it's interesting. I mean, I really wouldn't have wanted to publish a book in the middle of a global pandemic, but what's interesting is that the themes that run through the book about community and kindness and getting to know your neighbors and doing good things for people is something that's really resonated at this time that we're all going through. So I have had so many people contact me saying that reading at a time when everyone has been really miserable, reading the book has made them feel better about life and better about human beings and and the people that surround us. So that makes me very happy.
I read that you went to the Newham College in Cambridge,
Mm.
and that place has an impressive list of women writers. On the Wikipedia page for the college, you are just under Sylvia Plath.
You know what? My father noticed that, and I think he was more thrilled about that than anything else. He said, "Look, you're right next to Sylvia Plath." It has a very strong feminist history. So it was founded by Millicent Fawcett, who is one of the suffragists. And there's in the hall where we ate dinner, there was a flag that was hanging up, which was carried by the suffragettes in the original suffragette marches. So it has a very strong feminist tradition, and a tradition for sort of educating women at a time when women weren't educated. So I was very proud to be there.
Do you think for you writing has a cathartic or a therapeutical power?
Yes, totally. And I mean, I think because I started writing as therapy, when I started writing the blog when I quit drinking, and it really was my therapy. It was my way of sorting my head out and sorting my life out. And then it created a community, which was sort of my form of Alcoholics Anonymous therapy. When I started writing the Authenticity Project, I carried on writing in the same way. So it allowed me to explore other things I was interested in. So as I said, sort of things like social media addiction, postnatal depression, all sorts, the relationship we have with truth, and the way that so many people are lonely in today's world, despite the fact that we're also connected via the internet. Many people are lonely. So writing it allowed me to explore all of those things and to feel better about them, and to sort of work out how to make the world around me a little bit better, I guess.
Yeah. I guess you had to fought two big battles in the past years, one with the alcohol and the second with breast cancer. And that story is in the Sober Diaries.
Yes.
I think you were very brave to put your life in front of the world and to express so much of yourself to the total strangers. How did you decide to do that?
You know what? I was really terrified. After about a year after I started writing the blog, people started getting in touch with me saying, you really should turn this into a book, because it will reach a wider audience, and it will help more people. So I started contacting agents, literary agents, and I really, I wasn't sure that anyone would be interested in my story, but they were, and again, I had a number of publishers fighting for it, and I published it about 2.5 years ago, and I was terrified the few days before it came out, because when I started blogging, I blogged under a pseudonym. I called myself Sober Mummy, and I was very ashamed, and I was very worried about people finding out the truth about me and who I really was. And so when the book was about to come out under my real name, I was really terrified. And you know what? I realized that if you are really open about your own faults, that people can't find anything to beat you with, because I had already called myself an alcohol addict. I called myself a bad mother. I showed how imperfect I was. So nobody could turn around and call me those things because I'd already done it myself. Does that make sense to you? It was,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
it takes the power away from other people and it gives you the power back yourself. And then after the book was published, I've had, you know, even now, 2.5 years later, I still get messages every single day from people all over the world saying that that book really helped them because it made them feel less alone and it made them see that there was life on the other side of alcohol. And you know, I'm so glad I did it because it, I'm reminded every day of how much it's helped people. So yes, it was scary. It was really frightening. But you know what? Something I've really learned is that all the best things in life happen on the other side of fear. And there's a great book that was published years and years ago called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's so true, you know, if you go through life avoiding fear, you go through life avoiding living. So it was a good lesson to learn.
Yeah. So you wrote the Sober Diaries, then the Authenticity Project, a non-fiction book and a fiction book.
Mm-hmm.
How was it to to switch the narrative?
Oh, you know, they're more. It's more similar than you might think. Writing fiction and non-fiction, I found, in that you know, so much, as we've already talked about, I guess, so much of my fiction is inspired by what I've been through in my own life, and I wrote non-fiction as a form of therapy, and I carried on doing that with the fiction. I think what fiction allows you to do, which I really enjoyed, is just to make the story go wherever you want. With non-fiction, you know, when you're writing memoir, you have to write, you know, you're stuck with what actually happened, you know, whereas with fiction, the canvas is infinite. And you know, and as I said earlier, you know, you find that the story goes in places that you weren't expecting. It's an almost magical process sometimes. You know, you feel like you're not directing the story yourself, it's being directed for you. So that makes it a much more magical process in a way than non-fiction, I found.
Do you think your fiction writing, especially, is somehow influenced by your previous career in advertising?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You know what? Nobody has asked me that. But I think yes, because I think firstly because some of the themes that I explore in the Authenticity Project come from my life in advertising. So the difference between truth and fiction, and you know what we display and the reality, you know, is something that we played with all the time in advertising. You know, it's always about, you know, how do you make something look as good as possible, and how do you turn this story from something negative into something positive. It was inspired by advertising in that way, but also, I think the way I write is probably inspired by advertising as well, because I tend to write very short chapters, and I don't use overly flowery language. So I think I've been trained to keep everything as tight as possible. In advertising, you're only allowed a certain amount of time to tell a story, you know, 60 seconds or 30 seconds even. So I don't write very, very long flowery chapters, because I've never been trained that way. So I keep it very, very succinct.
Yeah, I know we had a two-book deal for you, and I am curious about the second book.
Well, interesting you should ask that, actually, because I was working on the second book for about a year, and it just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. And so in the end, after some discussion with my publishers in the UK and the US, I decided that I was going to start completely all over again with something a little bit different. And it was the best decision ever, actually, because it's now working really, really well, and I'm really excited about it, and I hope you will be too. It shares, it's very similar in feel to the Authenticity Project, but with a completely different cast of characters, and I'm really enjoying it. So yes, I hope you will too.
I'm very happy for you because it's important to write with pleasure and from your heart. But tell me, do you have a writing routine? Is there anything you do before you write?
Yeah, I write at a particular time. So I find that the time, in fact, the only time I can write new material rather than just edit things I've already written is very early in the morning. So I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning when it's still dark and everything is quiet. And I live in London, which is a very busy city normally. It's not so busy now. So it's a time when London is really silent, and that's when I write the new material. So I write between about 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. And then in the afternoon I go back and look at what I've written, and I edit it, and I move things around, and sometimes I look back and think, wow, that was brilliant, and other times I look back and think, God, that was awful. So you hope that when you look at it again, it makes sense. But the other thing that I do that I find really helpful is if I'm trying to work out what happens next in a story, or I'm trying to solve a problem, I often find that if I wake up in the middle of the night, that time when I'm half awake, half asleep, is when your brain can do some really interesting things, So actually, when in the middle of the day, when there are so many other things going on, you can't think, or certainly I can't think in a really creative and imaginative way. I need that dream state in the middle of the night to be able to do that. Or the other time I find when I can come up with really interesting ideas is when I'm walking. If I'm out walking in the countryside, again, amazing things can happen. So I find exercise or being half asleep, those are my magic moments.
Great. What would you write today in a green notebook, such as the one in the book?
Oh, well, I sort of feel like I've already told everybody all my deepest secrets. I think I think if I was to find a notebook now, I would encourage people to knock on the doors of their neighbors and find out, how they really are. How we always say, how are you? And you say, I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. And I think particularly at a time like this, if we can say to people, no, how are you really? What are you finding hard? What are you finding joyful? I think that would be a really valuable thing to do.
Thank you very much. It was a great interview, and thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. And I'm sure that your Romanian readers will absolutely love your book. And as I told in the beginning, when all this will be over, we are expecting you in Romania because
Oh, well, I would love that. I would very much like to visit, and thank you so much to you for for asking me such fabulous questions and for being so enthusiastic about my book. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you so much.